an original story by Martha M.C. Jenkins. The Ghost of Veridia's Twilight. Chapter 1. Becca's Night. The city of Veridia, as Becca knew it, was a creature of hushed sighs and shadowed secrets. Her days began not with the chirping of birds, but with the clatter of a closing ambulance bay door, the last echoes of a cardiac monitor, and the weary gratitude of families. Becca, a night shift nurse, moved through these hours like a phantom, her footsteps barely disturbing the hospital's sterile quiet. Her pragmatism was a well-worn shield, polished by years of confronting the raw edges of life and loss, a shield against the lingering ache of a past tragedy she rarely permitted herself to name. When her shift finally ended, as the sky over Veridia began its gradual transformation from inky black to bruised indigo, Becca didn't yearn for a soft bed. She craved the methodical tasks of her own small apartment, the silent companionship of the awakening night she was leaving behind, and, invariably, a cup of coffee that felt like a benediction for the long day she'd already lived. Her route home was a familiar ballet of deserted streets and flickering streetlights. She preferred the back roads, the ones that snaked past older buildings, their intricate stonework and darkened windows holding untold stories. Most people sped past them, oblivious. Becca, however, felt them. Not with her eyes, but with something deeper, a sense honed by proximity to human suffering, a quiet understanding of the fragility of existence and the weight of what was left behind. She pulled her modest car into the alley behind the Daily Grind, a small, independent coffee shop nestled between a defunct bookstore and a thriving florist. It was barely 5:30 a.m., an hour when most of Veridia was still dreaming. But Leo, the barista, was already there, a beacon of bright energy even in the pre-dawn gloom. Their interactions were a ritual of quiet nods and murmured pleasantries. Becca would order her usual, a simple black coffee, strong enough to cut through the lingering fatigue, and Leo would prepare it with an almost artistic flourish. He never asked about her night, and she never offered. There was a respectful distance between them, a shared understanding of the city's transitional hum, the liminal space they both inhabited, albeit at opposite ends. As she waited, Becca would often find her gaze drawn to the used coffee cups stacked carelessly on the counter, or sometimes a fresh one waiting for a customer. They weren't just vessels for caffeine, they were canvases. Leo tirelessly, compulsively sketched on them. Intricate, detailed drawings in swirling black ink. Sometimes they were fantastical creatures, sometimes swirling patterns. But often, she noticed, they were studies of Veridia itself. Not grand, recognizable landmarks, but understated corners, unexpected angles, the way a shadow fell just so across a wrought iron fence, or the delicate tracery of frost on a window pane. Becca, ever observant, saw them all. And sometimes a shiver would trace its way down her spine, a whisper of recognition she couldn't quite place. She'd sip her coffee, its warmth seeping into her chilled fingers, and watch the slow creep of dawn, the way the sky bled from dark purple to a hopeful gold. Becca was a creature of the night, but even she couldn't deny the quiet beauty of a new day, even if it meant the end of her own. Chapter 2. Leo's Dawn. Leo's alarm clock was the sunrise, a gentle, daily insistence that pulled him from sleep long before the city stretched and yawned awake. His apartment, a cozy nest above the Daily Grind, was filled with the scent of roasted beans and the faint echo of distant traffic. He wasn't just a barista, he was a creature of the dawn, his energy as bright as the first rays of light that filtered through his window. He loved the pre-dawn hours at the coffee shop, the quiet hum of the espresso machine stirring to life, the satisfying thud of the tamper, the rich, earthy aroma of freshly ground coffee. It was a meditative space, a sanctuary where his hands were busy, but his mind was free to wander, to observe, to create. Leo was an artist at heart, his medium the humble paper coffee cup. They were everywhere, stacked neatly on his counter, overflowing in a box under the register, even adorning a small shelf in his apartment. He didn't draw grand landscapes or portraits. He sketched Veridia not as it was, but as he felt it. He captured the city's ephemeral moods, its fleeting beauty, its forgotten histories, all in quick, urgent lines of permanent marker. A weathered gargoyle on the corner of the old library, its stone face seeming to hold centuries of secrets. The ghostly outline of a long-gone fountain in the town square, replaced by a modern sculpture, but still living in the city's subconscious. The intricate pattern of a drain grate, its iron mouth swallowing rainwater like tears. Customers often admired his art. "These are amazing, Leo," they'd say. "You should sell these." He'd just offer a shy smile. For him, it wasn't about selling. It was about seeing, about capturing, about making the invisible visible. He didn't quite understand why he drew certain things, or how he recalled such minute details, often from places he'd only glimpsed in passing. It was just an impulse, a feeling that guided his hand. Then there was Becca. She was his first customer, often his only customer, in that liminal space before the morning rush. She was quiet, almost ethereal, her presence as hushed as the street outside. He liked her. She was a steady, predictable presence, a quiet anchor in the ever-shifting currents of his day. She looked tired, always, but there was an intensity in her eyes, a depth he found intriguing. He often wondered about her night, about the world she navigated while his own was lost in slumber. He'd noticed she often looked at his cups, not just a quick glance, but a lingering gaze, as if she was trying to decipher a hidden message. He'd occasionally catch her eyes, and there would be a spark there, a flicker of something he couldn't quite define. It was a shared understanding, a silent communion between the creature of the dawn and the phantom of the night. Their lives were asynchronous, parallel lines that only met in this brief, misty twilight. But in those moments, a subtle current flowed between them, a current that was about to become an undeniable force. Chapter 3. Uncanny Ink. It started subtly, a prickle of unease that grew into a persistent hum. Becca, with her nurse's trained eye for detail and pattern, began to notice a peculiar reoccurrence in Leo's sketches. It wasn't just that they were beautiful, or that they captured Veridia's understated charm. It was their uncanny specificity. One morning, she picked up her coffee and saw a sketch of a weathered gargoyle. It wasn't just any gargoyle. It was the gargoyle, the one perched high on the corner of the old municipal library, its chipped stone face perpetually leering into the twilight. But what struck Becca was the way Leo had captured the specific glint in its eye, the particular angle of a crack in its jaw, details she'd only ever glimpsed in the weak glow of a street lamp, never in the harsh light of day. He'd even sketched the faint, almost invisible moss that clung to its brow, a detail she'd mentally cataloged during a particularly slow night shift patrol. A few days later, another cup bore the image of a patch of uneven cobblestones near the old clock tower. Becca knew that very spot. She'd stumbled on it once, nearly twisting her ankle, and had noted the way rainwater collected in a particular depression, reflecting the moon like a tiny shattered mirror. Leo's sketch showed that exact puddle, that precise moon reflection. How could he know these minute details? He was a creature of the day. Surely he wouldn't be wandering Veridia's quiet corners in the dead of night. The most jarring incident involved the town square. For years, a modern, abstract sculpture had dominated the center. But Becca often felt a ghostly resonance there, a faint echo of something else. One morning, Leo's cup depicted not the sculpture, but a grand ornate fountain, its tears overflowing with water, children playing around its base. It was a fountain that had been removed over 50 years ago, long before Leo or Becca were born, bulldozed to make way for Veridia's progress. Becca had only ever seen grainy photographs in the city archives during a bored afternoon's internet dive. Yet Leo had depicted it with startling vividness, down to the intricate carvings of mermaids and sea gods. Her pragmatism, her carefully constructed shield, began to waver. These weren't just pretty doodles, they were precise, almost archaeological renderings of a Veridia she felt but rarely saw. A Veridia that existed in the subconscious, in the lingering ether of memory. Becca found herself lingering a little longer each morning, her gaze flicking between Leo, diligently steaming milk, and the cups, which felt increasingly like encrypted messages. A strange excitement began to bubble beneath her usual calm facade. She was a nurse. Her life revolved around diagnosing the unseen, understanding the subtle signs the body gave. And Veridia, she realized, was giving signs. Subtle, pervasive, and utterly compelling, and Leo, bless his bright, oblivious heart, was drawing them. Chapter 4. The Whisper in the Stone. The decision to speak to Leo was not a sudden one, but a slow burn, fueled by weeks of increasingly uncanny sketches. Becca often rehearsed the conversation in her head during her quietest hours at the hospital, trying to find the right balance between curiosity and caution. How do you ask someone, "Do you realize you're drawing ghosts?" One particularly misty morning, the fog thick enough to make the streetlights glow with soft halos, Becca found her courage. She ordered her coffee, a little tremor in her voice, and waited. Leo, sensing a shift in their usual routine, offered a questioning glance. "Leo," Becca began, her voice low, almost a whisper, "your sketches, they're really something." He smiled, a familiar, easy grin. "Thanks, Becca. Just something to keep my hands busy." "No, I mean more than that." She pointed to the cup he'd just handed her. It was a familiar old lamppost near the library, but depicted with a specific tilt, a unique scratch near its base that Becca knew only too well from her Twilight walks. "This lamppost, I know that scratch, but you always leave before it gets dark enough for the streetlights to come on." Leo looked at the cup, then at her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "Oh, that one? Yeah, I don't know. It just felt right. I saw it once, maybe in the early morning light, or maybe I dreamt it." He shrugged, dismissing it with the ease of an artist who trusts his intuition without interrogating it. "And the gargoyle on the library," Becca pressed, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "You got the moss just right, the way the light hits it. I've only ever seen it like that after midnight, under the moon." Leo's brow furrowed. "The gargoyle? I think I just remembered it. From passing by, you know. It's a striking building." Becca took a deep breath. This was it. "Leo," she said, her eyes fixed on his. "Sometimes when I'm out at night, I feel things. Not physically, but echoes, emotions, in certain places. Like the ground remembers, the air remembers." She paused, searching for the right words. "Like the city has memory spots, and your sketches, you're drawing them." He stared at her, his usual bright energy momentarily dimmed by bewilderment. "Memory spots? What do you mean?" "The fountain in the town square," she continued, pressing on. "You drew it perfectly. It hasn't been there for decades, but I feel its ghost there. a sense of joy, then a deep, quiet melancholy. She looked around the empty cafe. I think you're seeing what I'm feeling. A silence stretched between them, thick with the scent of coffee and the unspoken weight of Becca's revelation. Leo slowly picked up a blank cup, his marker poised. He looked at Becca, then out the window at the still dark street. His mind, usually so quick and bright, was grappling with something entirely new. So, you feel a spot, and I draw it? He asked, his voice low, a mix of skepticism and dawning wonder. Perhaps, Becca murmured. Let's test it. This morning, as I walked in, I felt something at the old bakery on Elm Street. Not a building anymore, just an empty lot boarded up now. But I felt warmth and a sharp, quick scent of cinnamon. And then a sense of hurried departure, like someone left something behind suddenly. Leo's eyes widened a fraction. He felt an inexplicable pull, a warmth in his chest that mirrored her words. His hand moved across the coffee cup, not sketching a bakery, but a swirl of steam, a faint, almost invisible outline of two hands reaching, one holding a small, intricately iced bun, the other an outstretched, empty palm. Below it, a subtle brushstroke of what could only be cinnamon dust, and a single teardrop-shaped blotch of ink, as if a hurried tear had fallen onto the page. Becca looked at the cup, then back at Leo. A profound sense of recognition washed over her. He hadn't drawn a building, he had drawn the feeling. The ghost of Veridia's Twilight was beginning to speak, and they, in their quiet collision, were its interpreters. Chapter 5. First Light. Their first deliberate memory spot exploration began a week later, fueled by a shared, unspoken excitement. Becca, despite her innate pragmatism, found herself drawn into Leo's vibrant curiosity. He, in turn, found himself captivated by Becca's quiet intensity, her ability to perceive the unseen. Their asynchronous lives meant these moments were rare, precious windows in the misty twilight. Becca had chosen the gargoyle on the library. I always feel a sense of watchful sorrow there, she'd explained, her medical bag still heavy on her shoulder as she leaned against the counter, like it's guarding a secret but also lamenting it. Leo, usually an early riser, had stayed an extra hour after work, agreeing to meet Becca once her shift began the following night, a radical departure from his routine. He brought a small sketchbook and a thermos of his strongest brew. They met just as the library's security lights flickered on, bathing the old stone in an artificial glow. The gargoyle, high above them, looked particularly stern. Okay, Becca said, wrapping her arms around herself, not from cold, but from a familiar chill that crept into her bones in these places. Close your eyes if you want. Just listen. Feel. Leo closed his eyes. The city was still mostly quiet, cars whizzing by occasionally, but the library corner was a pocket of stillness. He heard the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, and Becca's steady breathing beside him. And then, as Becca focused, a sensation began to coalesce. I feel a man, Becca whispered, her eyes fixed on the gargoyle. Tall, worn hands. He loved this building. He designed it. He spent his life here, planning, sketching. I feel pride, immense pride in the details, the carvings, the arches, and then despair. A sudden, sharp despair, a hidden flaw, something he couldn't fix, a mistake that wasn't his, but that he took personally, a legacy tarnished. Leo's eyes snapped open. He didn't quite understand what Becca meant about feeling a person, but the emotions she described were vivid, almost palpable to him now. He opened his sketchbook and his hand flew across the page. He didn't draw the gargoyle as it was, but as an extension of the emotions Becca described. He sketched a man, slightly hunched, his face etched with both deep satisfaction and profound sorrow, holding a blueprint that seemed to unravel at the edges. Behind him, the library's facade rose majestically, but a single, subtle crack appeared in the drawing, running from the gargoyle's base, almost imperceptible. He even drew a single, elegant letter A entwined with a V in the corner of the blueprint, the architect's initials perhaps. Becca gasped when she saw it. "That crack," she breathed, tracing her finger over the drawn line. "I've never noticed it. It's so small." They walked closer, straining their necks to look at the stone, and there, almost perfectly hidden by shadow and time, was a thin hairline fracture, just as Leo had drawn it. "He built this," Becca said, a new understanding in her voice. "A brilliant architect. But perhaps the city pressured him to cut corners, or a patron demanded a cheaper material, and it broke his heart." "And the gargoyle," Leo added, looking up, "he put it there to guard his legacy, to watch over his unfinished business." His gaze was no longer just seeing stone. It was seeing the story embedded within it. He was beginning to understand, not intellectually perhaps, but with an artist's intuitive spark. In the first light of dawn, as the soft gray turned to pale rose, an invisible thread had woven itself between them. Becca, the pragmatic healer, had found someone who could give form to the city's unseen wounds. Leo, the bright artist, had found a muse, a guide who could lead him to stories deeper than any he'd ever imagined. The gargoyle, silent and watchful, seemed to approve. Chapter 6. Becca's Shadow. Becca's past loss wasn't a gaping wound anymore, but a phantom limb ache, a constant, underlying throb. It was the reason she chose the night shift, the reason she sought solace in the quiet hum of Veridia's darkest hours. Her younger sister, Clara, had been a vibrant, laughing force of nature, all bright eyes and boundless energy. She had been 8 years old when a routine tonsillectomy had gone tragically wrong, a rare and unforeseen complication, a sudden hemorrhage. Becca, then a young nursing student, had been in the waiting room, full of youthful optimism, convinced everything would be fine. The memory of the frantic calls, the sterile smell of the ICU, the hollow sound of her parents' sobs, it was etched into her very being. She had seen the doctors, the nurses, their faces a mask of professional regret. In the years that followed, Becca had become a nurse, driven by an unspoken vow to understand every nuanced symptom, to catch every hidden sign, to prevent such an unthinkable loss from happening to anyone else. It was a burden she carried, a quiet penance. She became meticulous, methodical, a sentinel against the unpredictable cruelty of life. This past tragedy, this quiet sorrow, was the lens through which she perceived Veridia. Every neglected corner, every forgotten story, every lingering echo of pain resonated with her own deep-seated understanding of vulnerability and impermanence. The city's hidden sadnesses were not just abstract concepts, they were reflections of her own. She saw Clara in the ghostly outline of the children playing by the long-gone fountain, felt her absence in the hurried departure from the old bakery. It was why Leo's optimism, his unburdened lightness, was so jarring, yet so utterly compelling. He was the sun to her moon, the vibrant splash of color against her muted evenings. He made her want to feel again, to shed the heavy cloak of pragmatism, even if just for a few fleeting hours in the twilight. Chapter 7. The Fountain's Tears. The next memory spot they explored was the site of the lost fountain in the town square. Becca had described it to Leo, a place where joy turned to profound sorrow. They met just before the first rays of sun kissed the eastern rooftops. The square was deserted, the modern sculpture a stark angular silhouette against the lightening sky. Becca closed her eyes, letting the familiar chill wash over her. "I feel laughter," she murmured, her voice soft. "Children, splashing, the joy of summer, a mother watching, serene, and then panic, a sudden, terrible quiet, a search, a call, a desperate, hopeless search." Leo listened, his sketchpad once again in hand. He felt the cold air, but something else, too, a faint echo of warmth, a whisper of childish glee, like a distant memory. His hand moved. He drew the fountain first, just as Becca had seen it in her mind's eye, ornate, overflowing, depicted in a style that felt both ancient and alive. Around its base, he sketched faint, joyful outlines of children, their figures blurred as if caught mid-play. One particular figure, a girl with buoyant curls, stood out. Then, as Becca continued, the search, days turning into weeks, the joy draining from the square, replaced by a heavy, suffocating grief. Flowers laid, then withered away. The fountain itself, a monument to what was lost, no longer a source of joy, but of tears, until they took it down, hoping to erase the pain. Leo's drawing shifted. The playful figures faded, become translucent. The vibrant water of the fountain turned to shadow. And in the foreground, he drew a single somber figure, a woman, her head bowed, her hand reaching out to where the girl had been, her form dissolving into mist. He didn't know why, but he felt compelled to add a small, delicately drawn daisy wilting at the fountain's edge. Becca's eyes welled up when she saw it. "A daisy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Clara loved daisies. The connection jolted through Becca. This wasn't just a city's memory. It was a mirror. The lost child, the lingering maternal grief, it resonated with her own guilt, her own sorrow for Clara. The weight of the city's past felt suddenly heavier, entwined with her own. Leo looked at her, sensing the shift. He didn't understand the depth of her personal connection, but he felt the profound sadness emanating from her. He reached out, hesitantly, and placed a hand on her arm. It was the first time they had touched, and the small gesture was a quiet comfort in the burgeoning dawn. Chapter 8. Bridging the Divide. Their asynchronous lives were a constant, subtle challenge. Becca's nights often stretched into her mornings, blurring the lines of her existence. Leo's days were vibrant and full, starting just as Becca's were ending. Their shared moments were stolen, carved out of the city's quietest hours. It became a ritual. Becca would finish her shift, grab her coffee, and instead of heading straight home, she'd linger. Sometimes they'd walk to a memory spot she'd sensed. Sometimes they'd just talk in the empty cafe, the air thick with the scent of brewing coffee and unspoken understandings. He'd make her a special tea, not coffee, to help her wind down, and Becca found herself talking more than she ever had, sharing observations about her long nights, the quiet lives of patients, the strange beauty of Veridia under the moon. Leo, conversely, would occasionally set his alarm for an hour earlier, meeting Becca for a quick twilight breakfast at a small diner that opened at 4 a.m. He'd leave her a small, drawn-on cup on the counter with a note, a whimsical sketch, a thought, a question, for her to find when she arrived for her coffee. Becca, in turn, began leaving him a small, folded paper under his apartment door, a short description of a new memory spot she'd felt, or simply a thoughtful observation about a rare bird she'd seen on her drive home. These small acts of connection became their lifeline, a way to bridge the chasm of their differing schedules. Leo learned the rhythms of her night, the unspoken language of fatigue and quiet heroism. Becca began to see the vibrant energy that fueled his days, the meticulous joy he found in his art. Their friends and colleagues noticed the change. The usually reserved Becca occasionally had a faint smile playing on her lips, a lightness in her step. Leo, while still bright, had a new, contemplative depth in his eyes, a seriousness that hinted at deeper understandings. The challenges were real. Missed calls, conflicting sleep schedules, the sheer exhaustion that sometimes made conversation impossible. But each effort, each small sacrifice, each stolen moment only deepened their bond. They were carving out a shared space in the middle of Veridia's Twilight, a place where day and night, practicality and art, sorrow and hope could finally meet. Chapter 9. The Gallery of Ghosts. As Becca continued to guide him, Leo's artistic gift blossomed. He began to feel the echoes too, albeit less intensely than Becca. He'd see a faded mural on an old brick wall and feel a pang of longing, a sense of forgotten joy. He'd hear Becca describe a deep sadness near the old train station, and his mind would conjure images of hurried goodbyes, of smoke and steam and distant promises. His art evolved. The cups became a chronicle not just of Veridia's visible beauty, but its invisible soul. He sketched the ghostly figures of those who once walked its streets, the emotions that clung to its old stones. He drew the bustling energy of a long-gone marketplace on the corner where a quiet bank now stood, the joyful clamor of children in a park that had long been paved over, the hushed reverence of a hidden chapel now used as a storage unit. Customers, used to his delightful doodles, now found themselves captivated by the emotional resonance of his work. This one, a woman said, holding a cup depicting the silhouette of an old woman sitting on a bench, a faint smile on her face. It makes me think of my grandmother. She used to sit in that very park. She didn't know that Becca had described a feeling of enduring love and quiet resilience at that exact spot, a feeling Leo had transformed into the woman's serene profile. Another man pointed to a drawing of a swirling dark current under an old bridge. I always felt something heavy there, he admitted. Leo had drawn it after Becca spoke of an overwhelming sense of despair and desperate finality beneath the ancient stone arch. Leo's coffee cups became a kind of public gallery of Veridia's hidden past, a tangible manifestation of the city's subconscious. People didn't understand how he knew these things, but they felt them. His art stirred something in them, a recognition of shared human experience, a connection to the deeper currents of their city. He still didn't fully grasp the true nature of his gift, the mystical intuition that guided his hand, but he understood its power, and he trusted Becca, his quiet oracle, to lead him. He was no longer just an artist. He was a scribe of the unseen, a purveyor of forgotten whispers. Chapter 10. Unseen Scars. As their connection deepened, so did Becca's willingness to lower her guard. Leo's unwavering optimism, like a persistent sunbeam, began to melt the permafrost around her heart. He didn't push, he just was, a warm, steady presence in the twilight hours. One morning, Becca found herself describing a new memory spot she'd felt, a small, forgotten alleyway behind the old theater, now a dilapidated building scheduled for demolition. "It's a strange mix," she explained, stirring her coffee. Excitement, anticipation, the thrill of performance. But then, a sharp, cold fear, a feeling of exposure, a loss of grace. Leo listened intently, sketching on a cup. He drew a stage, spotlighted, a single dancer in mid-pirouette, her figure both elegant and vulnerable. But he also drew shadows, long and reaching, creeping onto the stage, and a single broken feather lying at her feet. Looking at the cup, Becca felt a familiar tightening in her chest. "My sister, Clara," she said abruptly, the words escaping before she could reclaim them. She loved to dance. She was so bright, so uninhibited. She took lessons in a small studio, not far from that alley, I think. She had her first recital there. Leo paused, his marker hovering over the cup. He looked at Becca, his eyes full of gentle understanding. He already knew she carried a profound sadness, but she had never spoken of its source. "She was so excited," Becca continued, her voice thin, "but she tripped during her solo, fell. She was so embarrassed, and I just remember feeling so helpless, wanting to fix it, wanting to shield her from every hurt." Her voice cracked. "A few months later, she was gone." The words hung heavy in the air, a raw, exposed wound. Leo put down his marker. He walked around the counter and simply pulled Becca into a hug. It was a firm, comforting embrace, full of the warmth and steadfastness she rarely allowed herself to receive. "It wasn't your fault, Becca," he murmured, his voice soft against her hair. She didn't respond, but she leaned into his embrace, letting the carefully constructed walls around her heart finally crumble, just a little. In Leo's arms, in the hushed morning, Becca realized that Veridia's unseen scars were not just etched into its stones, but into her own soul. And perhaps, for the first time in a long time, there was someone who could help her see them not as blemishes, but as layers of a shared, resilient history. Chapter 11. The Shared Secret. Their partnership had solidified, a silent, powerful bond forged in the crucible of Veridia's Twilight. They were no longer just a night nurse and a dawn barista. They were keepers of the city's hidden heart, chroniclers of forgotten lives. Becca's intuition and Leo's artistry had become two sides of the same compelling coin. One particular memory spot drew Becca with an almost magnetic force. An old, abandoned orphanage on the edge of town, its windows long boarded up, its grounds overgrown. She'd driven past it countless times, sensing a powerful, swirling vortex of emotion there. "It's chaotic," she told Leo one morning, her voice laced with unease. "Laughter, yes, but also fear, loneliness, and then an overwhelming sense of hope, a desperate longing for freedom, and anger, so much anger, buried deep." Leo felt it too, a prickling sensation on his skin, a discordant hum beneath the surface of the city. This spot felt different, more intense than the others. They decided to visit it one late night, Becca after her shift, Leo having managed a few hours of sleep beforehand. Under the cold gleam of the moon, the orphanage loomed, a spectral presence. As Becca closed her eyes, clutching Leo's hand for an anchor, the emotions flowed through her, a torrent of voices from the past. "Children," she whispered, her voice strained. "So many of them. Neglected. But they found solace in each other. And one of them, a boy, he dreamed of escaping. He drew pictures. He wanted a better life for them all. He tried to organize something, a protest, a rebellion of sorts, but it ended badly, with violence and silence." Leo, his eyes wide open, began to sketch frantically. He drew children's faces, gaunt and yearning, peering through barred windows. He drew crude, hopeful drawings on the walls, stick figures holding hands, a sun rising over a distant landscape. And then his lines became sharper, darker. He drew the figure of a boy, his face resolute, holding a small, burning torch, confronting a looming, faceless authority figure. And finally, a single, devastating image. The torch dropped, extinguished, and a lone, broken toy soldier lying on the ground. Below it, in a flash of intuition, Leo wrote a single name, Silas. Becca shivered, a deep, full-body tremor. Silas, she repeated the name, her voice barely audible. He died here, silenced, his dream crushed. The intensity of the sorrow, the injustice, was almost unbearable. It resonated with her own sense of helplessness, her inability to save Clara. But there was also a defiant spark in it, an echo of the boy's courage. "No, Becca," Leo said, his eyes still fixed on his drawing. "He didn't die here, not truly. He was silenced, yes, but his dream, it lived on. Look." He pointed to a small, almost invisible detail on the sketched walls, a tiny, hopeful flower pushing through a crack in the stone. Someone remembered his dream. Someone carried it forward. Their shared secret, the weight of Silas's story, settled between them, a powerful current of understanding. It was painful, resonant with Becca's own deep wounds, but Leo's perspective, his inherent optimism, offered a glimmer of redemption, a belief in the endurance of hope, even in the darkest of memories. Chapter 12. Leo's Awakening. The memory of Silas and the orphanage lingered, a catalyst for Leo. That night, something shifted within him. He dreamt of the orphanage, not as Becca had described it, but with details he'd never seen or heard. He saw the boy, Silas, sketching on scraps of paper with leftover charcoal, his face illuminated by a stolen candle. He saw not just the protest, but the moment after, a group of smaller children huddled together, one clutching a small, worn wooden bird, a secret symbol of their shared hope. He woke with a start, the images vivid and insistent. He drew them immediately, not on a coffee cup, but in his proper sketchbook, creating a multi-panel narrative. When Becca saw it that morning, her jaw dropped. "The wooden bird," she breathed, tracing the delicate drawing. "I never mentioned a bird. And the charcoal sketches, those details are incredible." A profound realization dawned on Leo. It wasn't just Becca's feelings guiding him anymore. He was seeing it himself. The city's memories were flowing directly into him, bypassing the filter of Becca's intuition, seeping into his own consciousness. His gift was evolving, deepening. He was no longer just an interpreter. He was a receiver. I saw it, Becca," he confessed, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "In a dream. It was like I was there." Becca's gaze softened. "You're not just feeling the echoes anymore, Leo. You're becoming part of them. You're tapping directly into Veridia's memory." The revelation was both exhilarating and daunting for Leo. He had always channeled his artistic impulses without questioning their source. Now he understood the true, almost mystical nature of his art. His coffee cups weren't just pretty drawings. They were fragments of history, brushstrokes of the soul of Veridia, consciously rendered. The innocence of his gift had given way to a profound, almost sacred understanding. He was a conduit, a living link to the past, and it humbled him. Chapter 13. Confronting the Past. Armed with Leo's evolving gift, Becca felt a strange sense of readiness. The orphanage, Silas's tragic hope, had stirred something deep within her, echoing Clara's vulnerability, her youthful trust. But it was Leo's steadfast presence, his unburdened optimism, that finally gave her the courage to confront the raw heart of her own past grief. One misty morning, after a particularly draining night shift, Becca found herself drawn to a quiet, unassuming plaque on the wall of Veridia's small community hospital. It listed names, benefactors, doctors, and nurses who had served. But Becca felt a different kind of memory there, a cold, clinical sadness, a lingering sense of incomplete solace. "This is it," she murmured to Leo, her voice tight. This is where it happened. Clara. Leo's bright eyes softened, filled with immediate understanding. He didn't press, didn't ask for details. He simply stood beside her, his hand gently finding hers, a solid, grounding presence. Becca closed her eyes, the familiar hospital smells, the echoes of unseen suffering, mingling with the phantom scent of antiseptic. She felt Clara's fear, her small hand clutching a teddy bear, her parents' hushed, comforting words. And then the sudden, overwhelming panic, the frantic resuscitation efforts, the sterile machinery, the despair of the medical staff. She felt the moment of her sister's passing, a sudden, irreversible quiet, a breath that simply didn't come. Tears streamed down Becca's face, not quiet, controlled tears, but wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. The shield, so carefully maintained for so long, shattered. She wept for Clara, for the lost laughter, for the injustice of it all. She wept for the young Becca, so helpless, so utterly broken. And she wept for the burden she had carried, the silent vow that had shaped her entire life. Leo held her, his arms strong and comforting. He didn't try to fix it, didn't offer platitudes. He simply held her, allowing her to release the years of suppressed grief. As she slowly quieted, exhausted but lighter, he gently pulled a small blank cup from his pocket. "I feel it now, Becca," he whispered, his voice thick with empathy. The sadness, the sudden quiet, but also the immense love, the fierce protective love for a sister, and a strength, a quiet, enduring strength that came from that love. He began to sketch, not the hospital, not the sterile equipment, but a fragile, luminous butterfly taking flight, its wings bearing the faint outline of a child's face. Below it, two hands intertwined, one small and innocent, the other strong and resolute, holding on to a single daisy. Becca looked at the drawing, then at Leo, then back at the plaque. The cold, clinical sadness was still there, a part of the memory, but it was now interwoven with something else, the enduring love, the quiet strength that had allowed her to survive and ultimately to heal. In Leo's art, she saw not just the loss, but the legacy of love that Clara had left behind, a legacy that had, paradoxically, led Becca to him. Chapter 14. Veridia's Full Spectrum. Their shared secrets, their intimate understanding of Veridia's hidden past began to ripple outward, subtly transforming the city. Leo's art, now imbued with a deeper, more conscious understanding of the memory spots, gained a new resonance. He started creating larger pieces, commissions for local businesses, using his coffee cups as inspiration. He painted a mural on the side of the old theater, depicting the tragic dancer from Becca's memory, but also showing her rising, a phoenix from the ashes, surrounded by a vibrant, diverse community of artists. The once dilapidated building found new investors, sparked by the mural's message of resilience and renewal. The town square, inspired by Leo's popular sketches of the Lost Fountain, initiated a project to revitalize its central area. Not to rebuild the old fountain, but to create a new, modern water feature that paid homage to Veridia's past, acknowledging the lost children and the enduring spirit of the community. In a small, discreet corner of the new design, a single carved daisy was incorporated, a quiet nod to the past, a silent promise for the future. Becca, too, found herself changing. The weight of her past, though still a part of her, no longer defined her. She found herself smiling more, engaging more with her patients, sharing a quiet kindness that felt less like a duty and more like a genuine connection. Her nursing became less about preventing tragedy and more about fostering life, about nurturing the fragile flame of hope. They continued their Twilight explorations, guiding each other, discovering new layers to Veridia. They found stories of quiet heroism, of enduring love, of small acts of defiance that had shaped the city. The ghost of Veridia's Twilight wasn't just about lingering sorrow. It was about the full spectrum of human experience, of moments that, once acknowledged, could bring beauty and understanding to the present. The city itself seemed to breathe a little easier, its past acknowledged, its future embraced. Chapter 15. The Promise of Tomorrow. The morning mist was particularly thick, clinging to the old buildings of Veridia like a lover's embrace. Becca, finishing her shift, felt a profound sense of peace. The ache was still there, a faint echo, but it was no longer consuming. It was transmuted, woven into the fabric of her strength. She walked into the daily grind, not with the hurried step of a weary nurse, but with the quiet anticipation of someone stepping into a beloved sanctuary. Leo was there, humming a soft tune, already sketching on a fresh cup. Their asynchronous lives still presented challenges, but they had found their rhythm. They had learned to cherish the twilight, the liminal space that was uniquely theirs. They left notes, shared early morning meals, and found joy in the small, deliberate efforts they made for each other. Their love story had blossomed in the quiet corners of Veridia, nurtured by shared secrets and a profound understanding of life's delicate balance. "Found a new spot," Becca said, her voice light as she slid into her usual seat. "Near the old wharf, a feeling of departure, but not sorrow this time, excitement, and a sense of a long journey, successfully completed, a homecoming." Leo looked at her, his bright eyes twinkling. He didn't need to close his eyes anymore. He felt it too, a gentle warmth, a quiet thrum of contentment. He drew on the cup, not a ship or a distant shore, but two figures silhouetted against a rising sun, one reaching out to the other, their fingers just touching, and around them a subtle swirl of colors, blending the deep blues of night with the vibrant golds of dawn. He handed her the cup, their fingers brushing. "A shared future, do you think?" he asked, his voice soft. Becca looked at the cup, then into his eyes. The butterfly from Clara's memory, the daisy, the intertwined hands. It was all there, embodied in this new, hopeful image. The ghost of Veridia's Twilight wasn't just about the past. It was about the present they were building and the future they were stepping into together. "I think," Becca said, her pragmatism now infused with an unshakable hope, "it's about finding a way to make our own dawn, no matter when it arrives." She took a sip of her coffee, its warmth spreading through her. The city outside, still veiled in mist, seemed to sigh contentedly. Veridia's Twilight had revealed its secrets, and in doing so had illuminated the path for a quiet pragmatist and a bright artist to heal each other's hidden wounds, embracing the magic of their own unique embrace. The ghosts were still there, always, but now they were guardians of a beautiful, unfolding story.